Hello everyone, my name is Dallas McClain from Biohackers magazine. We are privileged to be here today with Dr. Bryan of Pneuma, nitric oxide. We're going to talk some fabulous things about nitric oxide and all the science and everything that goes behind it in the biohacking industry. We are at the BiohackingCongress in Austin, where there's over 30 great speakers and 50 vendors and scientists, everyone from the biohacking industry that's making a great new name for health in the form of biohacking. So we're very excited and pleased to be here, and do check out their website, biohackingcongress.com, where you can get tickets exclusively at a good price for the Congress coming up in Miami on the weekend of October 20th. So check that out. We're going to get right into it with Dr. Bryan here. So tell me a little bit about your background, because I know that nitric oxide is starting to take off maybe now, but it's been somewhat of a building process, right, of the study and the research behind it. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I started in this field, I guess, in the late 90s. I got a degree in biochemistry from University of Texas at Austin, and I got a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology from LSU School of Medicine in Shreveport. And then that was really when I introduced this whole science around nitric oxide. It was new in the scientific literature, but a Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery in 1998. So the scientific community knew it was an extremely important molecule, but there were many unanswered questions, like how does the body produce nitric oxide? What happens in people that can't make it? What symptoms do they manifest? And then perhaps the most important question that was unanswered at the time was, how do you fix or restore endogenous nitric oxide production? And so that's been the focus of my research for the past, I guess, more than 20 years now, on trying to answer those four fundamental questions. But, when I first started, there was maybe 30,000 scientific papers published on nitric oxide and very little awareness in the community to consumers and even physicians, for that matter.
Right.
And today, there's over 185,000 scientific papers published. There's a growing awareness around nitric oxide, but still not where it needs to be. And I think that's the beauty of the Biohacking Congress, because you've got these so-called early adopters who try to get at the forefront of new and emerging science that can dramatically impact their health and well-being. So whether you're healthy and trying to maintain health and optimize fitness and health, or if you're sick and not being well cared for by your physician, by having a poorly managed disease, then the biohacking communities, where all these communities come together to really, I think, will be a major force in forcing medicine to kind of adhere by these new principles.
Right. And that's really well said. It's interesting you brought that up, because biohacking in many ways is an explorative journey where we're all learning about our inner selves, but helping to make ourselves better in order to make the community better and serve the community better. And nitric oxide is starting to become a pretty household name almost in the biohacking industry, which is really cool to see. So I'm sure all of your work has helped contribute to that. And you've actually published a book, am I right? A few books.
A few books, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a book called Functional Nitric Oxide Nutrition that we published a couple of years ago. I've got a new book coming out probably in the second or third quarter of this year called The Secret of Nitric Oxide, where the book's going to serve two functions. Number one, talk about my personal journey on discovery and how we've kind of solved the riddle on nitric oxide biochemistry and product technology, and then also inform the reader on the importance of nitric oxide. Because it's clear now that your body cannot and will not heal without nitric oxide. So now we understand how the body makes nitric oxide, we understand what goes wrong in people that can't make it, and now we know how to fix those underlying problems.
So if I can start there then, that the 3 points that you brought up, how does nitric oxide made in the body in general in a normal person?
Well, there's two ways the body makes nitric oxide. The first pathway to be discovered was kind of in the late 1980s, where it was recognized that there's an enzyme in the body that converts L-arginine, which is an amino acid, into nitric oxide. And that's produced in the lining of the blood vessels, is produced in neurons. And then about 20 years later, it was discovered that there's another pathway that you can fuel through diet. So green leafy vegetables, they're enriched in nitrate. You consume these foods, the body takes that nitrate, puts it in our salivary glands, it's activated on by bacteria in the mouth, and then those bacteria generate nitrite and nitric oxide. So both of those pathways fuel nitric oxide production that then fulfill nitric oxide-based signaling. So the enzymatic pathway through the NOS enzyme is what becomes dysfunctional the older we get. So we make less nitric oxide in the lining of the blood vessels the older we get. In fact, by the time we're 40, we only have about 50% of the nitric oxide we had. But we can supplement that or fuel or compensate for that loss through diet. But that only works if you're getting enough nitrate from your diet. It only works if you have the right oral bacteria. And it only works if you have sufficient stomach acid production.
So a curious question then, is there a step before the enzymatic release of nitric oxide that initiates that enzymatic release, like from our stem cells or something, our body's natural repair system?
Well, there's ways to activate and stimulate nitric oxide production. Those are things like exercise. You can look at endothelial agonists like acetylcholine, bradykinin, some of these pharmacological agents we use in research. But it's really, the reason exercise is medicine is because it stimulates nitric oxide production. Right? So exercise lowers blood pressure, prevents cardiovascular disease. All the benefits of exercise can relate it back to the production of nitric oxide. But the problem is when that enzyme becomes dysfunctional, when you begin to exercise, you can't make nitric oxide because the enzyme is broken or it's dysfunctional. So then what happens is you start exercise, you can't maintain an exercise regimen, you become short of breath, and you basically fail an exercise stress test. So what we've had to do is understand the enzymology of that enzyme to where we can recouple it and make it functional again, but then give the body an exogenous source of nitric oxide that basically compensates for the loss of enzymatic production. So it's a very complex science in biochemistry, but really to restore nitric oxide or optimize nitric oxide production, we've recognized that it's really simple. It's diet and lifestyle, and then you got to eliminate things like mouthwash, eliminate fluoride in your toothpaste.
Toxins.
And if you're on antacids, you have to get off antacids. And so now we've created an environment where the body's actually optimized to produce nitric oxide.
So you have to start almost at a fundamental level.
That's right. We have to go back to the basics and stop doing the things that disrupt nitric oxide production, and then start doing the things that are clinically proven to promote it and activate it.
And then look at those people that maybe have more of a problem with producing nitric oxide naturally in the enzymatic pathway, or maybe using the nutrients from their diet, and talk about supplementation, which brings us to our next point about what you guys kind of do with Pneuma nitric oxide, right? So tell me a little bit about your focus area and your audience and how you're designing products to help people.
Well, once we've figured out how to fix the problem with nitric oxide production, then we could basically custom tailor innovative product technology that does that. So the premise of everything we do is, number one, if your body can't make nitric oxide, then we do it for you. Every one of our products generate nitric oxide gas. We can quantify it, we can verify it, and we can confirm it releases nitric oxide. But number two is we do really what no one else has been able to do in this field, is we improve the body's ability to make it on its own. So we understand the enzymology to the extent that we can recouple the NOS enzyme. We understand these production pathways in the saliva and in the microbiome in the dorsal part of the tongue. So now the body is actually primed to make nitric oxide. So when we see somebody who's deficient in nitric oxide, we start to ask questions. Do you use mouthwash? If you do, stop. Do you use fluoride in your toothpaste? If you do, then stop doing that. If you're on antacids, you have to get off. And then we start implementing, and by the way, even if they're doing that, our products still work. So anything that we do is not dependent upon the oral bacteria, because then every single person will have a differential response.
Right, it's more about complete optimization.
It's about, complete optimization. So our technology generates nitric oxide in the exact same way in every single person. So with our companies, we develop an orally disintegrating tablet. So when you put this lozenge in your mouth, it dissolves over 5 minutes, and then that releases about 30 to 40 parts per million NO gas. So that gas is vasoactive, it's biologically active, we can see a normalization of blood pressure, we see an improvement in exercise capacity. So those are the products that we brought to market early on, and then once we realized that the skin is an organ, right?
And so the largest organ.
One of the largest. And so if we don't have adequate blood supply to the skin, that organ fails. So we develop fine lines and wrinkles, we get acne, dermatitis, and we look old. So with Pneuma nitric oxide, we developed a dual chamber nitric oxide delivery system. So it's a serum, you got dual chamber, you take one pump from one side, one pump from the other, you mix it together and apply it to the skin and it generates nitric oxide gas.
Now, why can't those be mixed together already? Is it some type of chemical reaction or something?
Yeah, it's a chemical reaction that actually kind of recapitulates normal physiology. And so when nitric oxide is being produced on the surface of the skin, it diffuses into the skin, it recruits capillaries, and we basically improve blood flow to wherever we apply it.
Okay.
And now we've got 4 published clinical trials that show that we can improve blood flow, we can improve collagen deposition, improve hydration, fine lines and wrinkles go away. It's antibacterial, so it kills the bacteria in the acne pustules. It's great for wound healing. A number of things. I mean, it's really a remarkable product that we positioned in skincare and beauty. And the difference with us is we really created a new category in skincare, because most skincare and beauty products hide or mask the effects of aging. Right? What we do is we get to the root cause. The root cause of aging, whether it's aging skin, aging heart, aging sex organs, is a loss of regulation of blood flow. So when we restore nitric oxide, we restore blood flow, and now you mobilize stem cells, you improve cellular turnover, so you slough off the old cells, you build new cells, and the tone, texture, and clarity of the skin.
And you delay a lot of things that come with the aging process.
That's right.
In the process.
In fact, everything we know about aging, whether it's telomere shortening, mitochondrial function, or stem cell mobilization, is all controlled by nitric oxide. So when you lose the ability to make nitric oxide, you lose stem cell function, the mitochondria don't produce energy, and telomeres get shortened. And all 3 of those are hallmarks of aging.
Well, that's certainly one way to wrap it all together. So talking a little bit about the normal person, as we have been with aging, what about those people that have been through like trauma, such as burn victims or other people like that? Have there been any studies that show some type of correlation?
It's a very good question. So we've seen such remarkable results with our skincare. I've got a drug company called Nitric Oxide Innovations. So now we're taking our core technology, our topical serum, and we're developing that as a topical drug.
Okay.
Because we've seen really remarkable healing effects in certain drug indications. So in beauty, this serum is intended to improve the tone, texture, and clarity of the skin, right, or to beautify. But we've seen such amazing results in wounds, in burns, in non-healing ulcers, that we've modified this technology and going through FDA drug trials. And right now we've got an IND, which is an investigational drug application. We're submitting for non-healing diabetic ulcers. There's been no innovations in wound care for 50 years. Still treat wounds the way we did 50 years ago. And so I think this is going to revolutionize wound care. We're seeing 3-4-year-old non-healing ulcers we heal in 6 months with our topical serum.
Wow, that's really impressive. Yeah. So, and this is something that could work across all age groups. So there's no risk involved for being older or younger, right?
No, nitric oxide works the same in every single person, whether you're young or old. I mean, we deliver the right amount of nitric oxide at the right time in the right patient. And in that scenario, there's no contraindications, and there's no indication where nitric oxide would not be beneficial.
Well, that's very good to know. So talking a little bit about your product line and everything, where are you seeing most people gravitate towards, or people that don't know necessarily a lot about nitric oxide, where do they kind of start with you guys?
Different people are looking for different things, right? People have their own challenges. So a lot of people in skincare and beauty, people don't want to look older than they are, right? And so the skin is an outward reflection of kind of endogenous health or inside health.
Yeah.
So if you're not healthy on the inside, your skin's not going to radiate beauty and not look good. So a lot of people find us in our skincare products looking for things that are beautifying, that are going to reduce their fine lines and wrinkles and make them look younger than they actually are. Other people are suffering from some pretty serious health conditions. They're poorly managed by their physicians, and they're looking for solutions. And then they'll find us with that. So for instance, most people that search for nitric oxide are searching for a remedy for high blood pressure, because they realize nitric oxide helps dilate the blood vessels and normalize blood pressure. Other people with metabolic disease, they'll find us looking for a more natural, functional approach to combating their metabolic disease, whether it's diabetes or just exercise intolerance or hyperlipidemia, things like that.
And that's when they would take the lozenges and stuff?
The lozenges, yes.
The lozenges, okay. So people could do the lozenges and also do the skincare thing, right? Like,
Well, we positioned that so, for me, beauty is inside and out. So with the lozenge, we create an endogenous systemic source of nitric oxide. So we're dilating the small vessels from the inside. And then when you apply it topically, we're dilating the superficial blood vessels and recruiting capillaries. So we're hitting it from the inside out.
attacking it from both ends.
That's right.
Okay, so that's really cool.
And then we've got a beet powder that we've fermented. We've removed the oxalates and the beet pulp, the beet powder, the beet taste. So now we've got a beet product that we get a lot of exercise enthusiasts, because beets have been used now for probably more than 10 or 12 years for exercise performance. But beets are the third least liked vegetable on the planet.
That's
95% of the beetroot products out there don't work. They don't do anything in terms of nitric oxide. So we've created a really innovative, great product that generates nitric oxide. You don't have to worry about gout or kidney stones because there's no oxalates in it. We've added electrolytes to improve cellular hydration, and then we've added mitochondrial ATP to where you improve energy production. So this is a fantastic pre-workout product that's really taken hold in a lot of sports enthusiasts, or for people as a replacement for things like Red Bull and 5 Hour Energy and these monster energy drinks that are killing kids and causing a lot of harm and damage. So we position this as a natural energy source,
right.
that's actually good for you and promotes health rather than is deleterious to health.
Well, that's well said. So the beet powder, I'm curious, is it something that a lot of people mix with stuff, or do they just take it straight together? Or
we designed it to be taken in a shot of water. So
Okay.
as soon as that powder hits solution, it starts generating NO gas.
okay.
And so you put one sachet in 2 to 3 ounces of water, you mix it up, and then you take it immediately as a shot. So as soon as that hits water, it generates nitric oxide. So when you consume it, now we're generating nitric oxide throughout the entire body.
Great.
And we're improving electrolytes, and we're giving the body the energy currency of the cell, which is ATP.
So now that we know how much of a role and moderator nitric oxide plays in a lot of these bodily processes, especially of repair and treating trauma and healing, what about other things that come into play, other variables in biohacking? People call it stacking, biostacking and stuff. Are there things that you've seen from experience or heard other people tell you, or maybe you've seen studies of people applying other tactics on top of this nitric oxide supplementation?
Yeah, nitric oxide is foundational, and it's a great biohack stack. So really what we're finding is that anything you do, nitric oxide is going to make it better. So for example, personally, I use an infrared sauna, which is known to help detoxify and generate nitric oxide. So I take the lozenge or take our nitric oxide prior to getting into an infrared sauna. So now you're going to potentiate the effects of red light therapy, and you're going to improve the detoxification effects of that. Or if you're going to the gym, you take nitric oxide before you go to the gym, your workout's going to be more efficient. The perceived exertion of your workout is going to be less, and you're just going to have more energy.
So let's talk a little bit about the plateau or how much nitric oxide we should be taking. How did you guys figure out the dosage of like that's safe but very effective and not too much, not too little?
Well, in order to answer that, we had to know how much nitric oxide a healthy human would make over a 24-hour period, depending on different conditions.
Okay.
So you can look at radio-labeled isotope studies and the conversion of arginine to citrulline, so we know how much is made through the enzyme. We look at the standard American diet or other dietary patterns and figure out how much nitrate you're getting from that diet, how much is converted to nitrite, and then we combine all those and figure out, okay, if we dose this, then this would completely recapitulate normal physiology of, say, a healthy 21-year-old. So that's what we've done in all of our product technology. So not only is it safe, but it's effective, and it completely copies what nature has designed us to do.
So when you say, just one thing you brought up, the American Standard Diet, is that going off of like what is recommended, or is that more like what data shows, or like how does that work?
Well, when we brought this to market, there was kind of no prototype or predecessor to what we were doing.
Okay.
So we actually established the guidelines.
Okay.
So we had to query the FDA to figure out, okay, what could we do in terms of dosing of nitric oxide that we could position this as a dietary supplement. And in order to do that, you can't exceed what would normally be consumed through normal dietary patterns.
Okay.
And obviously, the standard American diet is not one that I would recommend. It's
Right.
not replete in minerals and nutrients.
Of course.
But those are the guidelines. So that's kind of the basis we had to go by.
Right.
Now we understand that, for instance, if you use the dietary approaches to stop hypertension or a Japanese-based diet, then those nutrient requirements are much higher because those are more health-promoting diets.
Right.
But those were the guidelines that we were given and that we went by. And fortunately, not only is it safe, but using those guidelines, it happens to be very effective.
I see. So, are you only available usually in the American market, or are you guys international as well? And do you have to adapt that approach of the dosage and everything?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We have done some international expansion, but every country's regulatory body is different.
That's true.
And they require different registrations. So some countries, for instance, Mexico and Canada are relatively easy to get in. Australia, New Zealand. Other countries like India and China are a little bit more difficult, just because their regulatory bodies are, requiring different things.
Makes sense. So we've talked a little bit about how the everyday person uses their people from trauma and stuff. What about the unordinary person, the athlete, or someone that really needs all this, energy and nitric oxide and everything? Are we seeing any, effects or evidence like from their part of saying like, man, maybe without this nitric oxide, I'm not sure if I could have finished this race or that, things like that?
Yeah, we've witnessed that, but it's easy to improve the performance of a regular American, right? Kind of the weekend warrior, the everyday Joe.
Right.
It's very difficult to improve the performance of a well-trained athlete.
Okay.
Right? But even if you improve their performance by 1%, many times when you're in competitive sports, that's the difference between last and first.
Well said, yeah.
So you only have to improve their performance a little bit.
Right.
And we've got, over the past, 10 or 12 years, we've had probably over 100, maybe 200 NFL or professional NCAA programs use my nitric oxide technology in one form or another because they understand the benefits of nitric oxide on athletic performance. They understand its effect on recovery. Mm-hmm. And in these competitive sports, a little bit of competitive advantage is the difference between winning and losing.
That's very true. Now, what about people that are in kind of environments where there's a lot of toxins and stuff like that? Maybe minors or, even people that have a lifestyle that's a little bit more where they're exposed to toxins. Maybe they're drinking or around smoke a lot or something like that. Are these people more inclined to use nitric oxide to offset some of those effects? Or?
Yeah, what we're finding is most toxins, whether it's heavy metals, or whether it's mold mycotoxins, whether it's EMF from 5G or some sources of radiation, all of those are disrupting nitric oxide production.
Okay.
So the more toxic you are, the less nitric oxide you make. And on the other form, some toxins actually scavenge nitric oxide. So not only is it affecting the production of nitric oxide, it's affecting the bioavailability of nitric oxide.
So what do you mean when you say scavenge? I'm sorry, can we...
So when nitric oxide is produced, and it's a gas, so it's gone in less than a second. But if you've got heavy metals, for example, then those heavy metals that are circulating in the blood will scavenge that nitric oxide before it has a chance to reach its target to do its job. So it's almost as if it's mimicking insufficient production. So even though it's produced, it's scavenged before it does its job. So you still have the same symptoms if you were nitric oxide deficient, but then, the more toxic you then not only are you affecting the scavenging, but you're affecting the production. And then it's those people that become extremely nitric oxide deficient, and those are the ones that are typically the sickest. So what we find in those patients, if they take our nitric oxide, those are the ones you see the biggest therapeutic effect of.
Right. And imagine if you can get the toxins out of their body.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, nitric oxide's foundational, but it's not a panacea. It's not an end-all be-all cure-all. If you're full of toxins, nitric oxide is going to help us kind of mobilize that and help you excrete them, but you still have to remove yourself from the source of exposure. You still have to dig a little bit deeper and figure out what's wrong with this patient, what other toxins are we missing,
right.
Are there nutrients that this patient's deficient in that's affecting their overall metabolism. So, people get sick for two reasons and two reasons only. Their body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need.
Right.
And if you replete missing nutrients, remove the source of toxins or infections, the human body heals itself.
Very true. Yeah. The more I get into biohacking, the more I start seeing is like you really have to set some type of healthy baseline where you get yourself right at a very foundational level, and that just helps you in everything that you try. So. Yeah.
Well, we have to listen to our body. Our body tells us when something's not going right.
Right.
and it's affecting the way we feel, the way we perform. And if you ignore that and don't right the ship, then that's when people get sick and get disease.
Right.
So I encourage people to listen to your body. Our body constantly communicates with us. We have to listen, and sometimes we have to pivot and make some changes because it's much easier to prevent disease than it is to treat it.
Very true.
So
Preventative medicine.
We have to be proactive instead of reactive. And unfortunately, Western medicine is a reactive approach.
Right, right. And in a lot of ways, it's helpful to be reactive in emergency situations and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But if we have that chance to be thinking about our health, investing that time in our health, we won't have to invest the time in our sickness and figuring it out later on.
That's right. Humans, by nature, are fear motivated, right?
Yeah.
Most humans aren't proactive in taking care of their health. They only react when they have a crisis, when they have a heart attack, when they have a stroke, and then the damage is done. It's too late.
Yeah.
So I think this whole biohacking community is kind of changing that conversation of what do we do to be proactive, because really our greatest asset is our health. If we have, if we're financially successful and we have a great family, but we don't have our health, we can't enjoy the fruits of our labor. So, our health is our most important asset, and it's probably the least, people put the least amount of resources in.
And I think part of what you're saying too is why there's so many people in the biohacking industry that have a pain to purpose story, and they were kind of the sacrificial lamb in a way of speaking of, okay, I had to go through this to learn this, and I learned it all, and now I want to share it all with everyone else so they don't go down the same journey and save them time and stuff like that. So that's always great to see.
Yeah, and I think, for me, I come from academia, right, with a long history of, education and regimented studies and research and doing kind of population-based clinical studies. But what I'm learning in the biohacking field, the most important experiment is the N equal 1. Right, that individual patient who experienced something made one change and get themselves better,
right.
Whereas allopathic medicine failed them, and in fact was making them sicker. So,
right.
To me, that's really opened my eyes to, it's not just kind of the double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study that's important. It's what happens in an individual patient when they make certain changes.
Right.
And then how do we integrate all that from multiple N equal 1 experiments, and to make a really concise story on how we change the landscape of medicine.
It's it's changing the landscape, changing like the paradigm that the Western culture is caught in a lot of, like, just put a Band-Aid on the symptom. Let's not look into the cause, right? And biohackers trying to say, whoa, let's look under, let's see if we can find something here that we can maybe change, and then track that and show some metrics. And that's what I love about it. It's a great community approach to it too. I wanted to talk a little bit about your company and where the direction is heading and everything for the future, because as you talked about at the beginning of this interview, this type of technology that we're seeing and this type of community that we're seeing is pushing on advancement and the early adopters of medicine moving forward to try and change some of that paradigm that we were just discussing. Where are you guys in that direction? Like, what should we be ready for coming out soon in the field of research for nitric oxide?
Well, my mission and motivation now is to introduce safe and effective nitric oxide product technology in every major market segment around the world. We've done that in nutrition and dietary supplements. We've done it with skincare. Now we're moving into FDA drug therapies. We've got drugs in phase 3 clinical trials for COVID, ischemic heart disease, Alzheimer's, ischemic non-obstructive coronary disease.
Interesting.
So every major poorly managed chronic condition today can be affected by nitric oxide. So I'm most excited about our nitric oxide drugs. I think it'll be the way we treat patients for the next 100 years. We're seeing a remarkable effect on, ischemic heart disease. I think there'll be a utility and indication for heart failure, Alzheimer's, because every single chronic disease is characterized by decreased blood flow. And inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And nitric oxide corrects every single one of those. So we're going to, I think in terms of biohacking, to give, the beauty of nutrition and dietary supplements is it's readily available to anybody who wants it. So my challenge and our challenge is education and awareness, and making people aware of how important nitric oxide is for their own health and well-being. And then providing not only safe products, but effective, verifiable products that actually generate nitric oxide. Because consumers are confused. There's so many companies out there selling nitric oxide products that are deceptive and many times fraudulent advertising because they don't deliver nitric oxide. There's no way biochemically they can deliver nitric oxide. But yet these products are sold as nitric oxide products. So my objective is to kind of set the stage and set a new precedence for effective nitric oxide products. Call out the pretenders, make them change their scope of marketing so that consumers aren't confused. And then I think that's the way the field advances.
That's an earnest mission, and not an easy one either. When you have
well,
all
you become a target as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not just you, but so many people in the biohacking industry. You see, they're trying to get their message across and get it out there, but it's really difficult with all the already established players at the table.
That's right. This is very disruptive. And anything you do, anytime you do something that's disruptive, you become a target. And I like the quote by Schopenhauer back in the 1600s. He said, "Fundamental truths go through three phases. First, they're ridiculed. Second, they're violently opposed. And then they're accepted as being self-evident."
Right.
So I've been ridiculed. My technology has been violently opposed. But at the end of the day, it's going to be accepted as being self-evident because nitric oxide is what it is and it does what it does. And we know how to deliver nitric oxide at the right dose, at the right time, in the right patient.
Right.
And that's just the truth.
Yeah, and that's a great saying. I've always loved that saying. And being a disruptor is a good thing in a way when you're challenging to make things better for everyone, So a lot of people just see it as like, why disrupt the status quo? But it's like you need that. Change is a good thing if you make it a priority. So I did have one follow-up question on the drug. I don't know if that's like just a phrase or a word, or like what makes it a drug as opposed to the other one that was a
it's a very good question. So it's the basic core technology of how we generate nitric oxide.
Okay.
So for a dietary supplement, the only thing you have to do is demonstrate safety, right? You can't put to market a product in a supplement nutritional space that causes harm, although there's many supplements out there that are causing harm. But you don't have to solve a major problem, right? Okay. In fact, you cannot make a drug claim on a dietary supplement.
Right. We've all seen the labels on the.
Yeah, it's not intended to treat, cure, prevent, or any disease.
Right.
So for drug applications, we have to file what's called an investigational drug application, an IND, to the FDA, and we have to outline exactly what indication we're going after. Let's use ischemic heart disease, for example.
Okay.
So not only do we have to demonstrate safety, that the dose we're giving to these patients with an established disease is safe and not going to cause harm, we actually have to define the parameters and the endpoints that's going to make them better. And then we do the clinical study to actually prove that, and if the drug works, then we file what's called a new drug application with the FDA. They review the data, both safety and efficacy data, and then they give us approval for that. So that's now an FDA-approved drug that's gone through the rigors of FDA clinical trials.
I see.
And now physicians can then write a prescription for that drug, for a patient, for that indication. Where a dietary supplement, you can't do that.
So let me ask you this, and another curious question. For drugs that are on the market that are supposed to cure or treat a disease, but they've been shown to have some harmful side effects and everything like that, how do they still get approved? Is it because those side effects come out later from later studies?
Well,
I'm not expecting you to know all the answers.
There's. Let me show you how it's supposed to work.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'll tell you how it does work.
Okay.
Based on the pressures of the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
So with most drugs, there's always going to be side effects, right? Because when you give the body, and most drugs are inhibitors of biochemical reactions in the body. They're synthetic compounds that inhibit a biochemical reaction.
Okay. Right.
And when you do that, there's always going to be side effects. But it's the FDA's job to say, is the risk worth the benefit? Mm-hmm. And when the risk outweighs the benefit, the drug isn't approved. In fact, it never gets past phase 2 or phase 3 trials. They just stop it because it's not safe.
That makes sense. Yeah.
When there's moderate risk, but the benefit is so overwhelming, then you just have to, you approve the drug, but then you have to communicate the expected side effects.
Right.
And that's when you see these 30-second drug commercials and 25 seconds of it are side effects.
Right.
So that's not what we do. We don't do pharmacology in our drug development program. We do what's called applied physiology. So we're not giving the body synthetic inhibitors that are causing a disruption in some biochemical reaction. We're actually giving the body what's missing. we're giving the amount of nitric oxide that's missing from that particular sick person or for that particular indication.
In a natural way.
In a natural way. So in our COVID drug study, we didn't see any side effects, no adverse events, and we treated some of the sickest COVID patients on the globe. High risk, highly susceptible patients on multiple medications, no side effects. So our drug number 1 is safe. Now all we have to do is prove that it's efficacious in the indications we're going after.
I see. Okay. Well, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So to close, I wanted to see if you could tell the people and everyone watching and listening how they can find out more and what's the best way to connect with you or in the Pneuma nitric oxide team.
Yeah. I tell people, I encourage people to do their own research. I send people to my educational website, which is drnathansbryan.com. I do a monthly blog. There's a couple of videos on there that will educate and inform on nitric oxide. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, Twitter at Dr. Nitric, LinkedIn. I've got a YouTube channel. I encourage people to do the YouTube because YouTube has really become a good platform for actually demonstrating and showing people the difference between our nitric oxide product technology and the other hundreds, if not thousands, of nitric oxide products out there. We've got an episode called Does Your Nitric Oxide Product Work?, where we actually put that product to the test and show people in real time using objective quantifiable data whether that product actually works. So
That's cool.
I encourage people to subscribe to my YouTube channel. We keep it fun, but nitric oxide is so important. It's one of those things that your body will not perform optimally or heal if you're sick without sufficient nitric oxide. So I think it's one of the most important things you can do for biohacking.
I'm sure everyone heard that. Make it a priority, nitric oxide production and getting the best out of your supplements and your diet and your lifestyle. So it's been a pleasure, Dr. Bryan.
Thank
I'm
you.
Sure we'll see each other again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for watching Dallas Biohackers Magazine at Biohacking Congress here in Austin. Have a great day.